Good morning, happy Friday everyone. Good morning and welcome to our last episode of Updates from London before the summer break. We'll have a break for the next few weeks and then we're going to be back in September. But as sort of last episode, I've got a special guest today. Her name, as you can see from the video, from the title, is Edward Tambudzai. Hi Edel.
Hi Emmanuel.
Thank you so much for being with us today for the next sort of 45 minutes or so. And as you can all see, the topic of today's video is, UK BLM, a conversation with Edward Tambudzai. And I really wanted your name to be in the title because I know you've been you've been very sought after the past few weeks. You're a public speaker. You've been interviewed by the likes of also the BBC and many other media. And you're the founder of Sonaaar, but I think I should introduce myself. Ethel, would you like to introduce yourself for our viewers?
Cool, thank you so much for inviting me on, Emmanuel. I'm Edward Tambudzai, co-founder of Sonaaar, which is a platform connecting Black communities around the world. So as you can imagine, with Black Lives Matter, I've been working to make sure we're connecting with all our members wherever they are and find out what's happening where they are and sharing that news across the community. I also work as a business development and business strategist consultant, so helping organizations build them from their idea up to concept and helping them with the process and structures in between that. Cool.
Amazing, thank you. So yours is a sort of 360-degree approach, I would say.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. So, Edda, what we're trying to do with our updates from London, we try to, analyze sort of the main news of the past sort of, what's happened, the hot topic in the UK at the moment. And of course, BLM, Black Lives Matter, it's been in the news for, I would say, the next few weeks or even few months. I guess, everyone, I think when the replacement of Edward Coulston statue 2 weeks ago happened in Bristol, and then it was replaced with the one emulating Jen Reid, who is a Black Lives Matter activist. This is when, Black Lives Matter sort of jumped back into the news. The one question I'd like to ask you, Edel, how the sort of BLM messaging, which, hails from the US, how does it align with the UK? What kind of, how does the UK reality sort of fit in with the Black Lives Matter messaging?
Sure. So firstly, I'd like to say, I think with Black Lives Matter, it's the largest global rights movement that's come out of following the civil rights across the world, where all the different countries involved are speaking about the same things and the same topics at the same time. So Black Lives Matter is very much aligned to what's going on in the UK at the moment for Black and brown people, particularly with police brutality in the UK, which happens in a different manner where within police custody, I think it's now over 1,700 people who've died in police custody or been permanently or have been permanently disabled from that experience. But also we look at the hostile environment, which was launched by Theresa May's government, which is very much focused at how do we catch out people who are not citizens in the UK and make it harder for them to become citizens or even enter the UK in the first place. And we look at the Windrush scandal, which though it affects people of our parents' age and our grandparents' age, is still something that's happening now. My grandparents who met in the UK in the 50s and 60s, their passports still read British subject, even though they're citizens. They've got their pensions from the UK, but they're still considered British subject. I think the hostile environment is one way of being able to look at what is happening in the UK and looking at what Brexit looks like. I think the European aspect of it, of leaving the UK with Brexit, highlighted that a lot of the rights that we take for granted for European citizens are also have come under attack with the residency permits and having to reapply. It's kind of a similar situation that's been going on for other Black peoples around the country for a long time.
Of course. So it's this is sort of, you know, that's main messaging. I will say in terms of you know, sometimes, you know, as we were discussing before, sometimes, you know, Black Lives Matters, you know, when you have protests and all these like big demonstrations, sometimes the mainstream media focus on the wrong thing of the demonstration. You know, what happens, you know, if there is a disorder, you know, there's like a very small group of people doing, you know, let's say assaulting monuments or you know, graffiti and stuff like that. But this is not sort of the core message of Black Lives Matter. I mean, one of the things I noticed is that, you know, the coverage of mainstream media sometimes, you know, you get, of course, you know, focused on the wrong thing. Hence, you know, this is why this kind of, you know, updates from London today wants to be sort of, you know, the other side of Black Lives Matter. What's really, you know, the movement about and how it's relevant to the UK, and I guess all things you've said so far, they capture the subject, the topic of today is incredibly well. I know you mentioned, for example, you know, the Windrush scandal. So do you think there has been a sort of lack? There's been like a loss of trust of Black community towards the government, you know, because of the Windrush scandal, for example, or even can we say like, you know, the tragedy of Grenfell Tower. You know, where there were more, you know, where most of the families were Black or Asian. Do you think there has been like a loss of trust towards like the government because of all these events?
Yes, definitely. And I think you mentioned Grenfell, for example, and the Windrush scandal. I think there's always been a slight mistrust of what it is the government or what the UK government's real intentions were. But when it comes to the Grenfell Tower tragedy, for example, I mean, 3 years on, we're still waiting for that inquiry to come to pass. We're still waiting for justice to happen. We're still waiting for a real legislative change to happen. And the rest of the buildings that still have flammable cladding are still standing in London. Those people haven't been rehoused. Survivors of Grenfell Tower are still in temporary housing 3 years on. So I think there's real reasons for mistrust across the black and brown communities in the UK. And the government haven't really done anything to address that. And it seems they don't care.
And absolutely, and I totally agree with that. I think especially, you know, when it comes to Grenfell Tower, and, you know, the matter has been sort of taken on very, very sort of slowly. You know, we in the introduction to our video, you know, we called about, you know, the as I said before, you know, Black Lives Matter have sort of, I guess, part of the protests that we've seen been, you know, they've targeted sort of statues. You know, you were also talking about the decolonization of the national curriculum. Would you like to expand a bit more on that kind of, you know, sort of on that objective?
Sure. So, I guess in the UK, so the national curriculum usually talks about Black history in October during Black History Month. But even then, going back to when I was at school, you're taught about the civil rights movement in the US as the main focal point. Nobody really talks about what happened in the UK. What about the Bristol bus boycotts? What is the Commonwealth? Where did the Commonwealth come from? And if I talk you through what I learned during my time at school, it went from the Aztecs in Latin America to World War II, and then we went to the civil rights movement in the US. At no point do I remember learning anything about the Windrush scandal, or what does civil rights look like in the UK? What does it mean for me and my history? I was born in Zimbabwe and raised in the UK. What does that mean for me? Like, how did we come to be here? When people are shouting racial slurs or abuse of go back home, do they know where home is? Do they know why my parents came here or how my grandparents got to be in the UK? Which are very vital key questions, and something that was recommended in the Macpherson report over 20 years ago following the Stephen Lawrence inquiry. Yeah. So, I mean, decolonizing the curriculum is one of the key ways of addressing institutional racism in the UK. And it's something that's still not been addressed, or something that's still not been applied on a national scale.
You just mentioned institutional racism in the UK, which also refers to systemic racism. I guess they're all part of the same problem. For all our viewers, our listeners, can you actually maybe define systemic racism and whether in how sort of it's present in sort of today's society in the UK?
Yeah, sure. So systemic racism is the way the systems in which we rely on as a society disproportionately affect or disadvantage for Black people or people of color to engage with. So, for example, when we look at the education system, the education to prison pipeline disproportionately affects young Black people or young Black people across the UK, where 1 in 10 young Black people is informally excluded from school, which means the school can tell them that they're excluded, but they are not given any formal provision for whilst they're not in education. And what happens to children who are excluded earlier on from a young age or continually excluded from schools? Well, they're less likely to engage in education as a formal system. They're less likely to get qualified jobs. They're more likely to become blue-collar workers overall. We look at the healthcare system. Me as a Black woman, I'm 5 times more likely to die from improper care or to receive treatment. I'm less likely to receive treatment for the same issue that a white woman would. I'm more likely to spend 4 times long in A&E while waiting for pain relief or waiting for emergency medical relief because of the color of my skin. And there's been multiple studies on this. If we look at the prison system, I'm more likely to get a longer long-term sentence than somebody who's committed the same crime if they get a sentence at all. These discrepancies across the systems of justice, of education, of health, and all the other forms of public services, I think, highlight what systemic racism can look like because of the color of my skin or because of the race that I'm perceived.
Of course. And also I was reading on, because we just went through a terrible crisis, such is, well, still is, the COVID crisis. And I was reading that Black people are more likely to receive a fine for sort of breaking lockdown.
Oh, wow.
So I was reading, in anticipation of today's video, so which goes back to your point on systemic racism, and how can we? It might seem like a very straightforward question, and with a straightforward answer, but how can we fight and defeat not just systemic racism, but racism in general?
That's a very big question, which I think people have been asking for centuries, because racism...
Education, you were talking about decolonizing the national curriculum, I guess will definitely help towards that objective.
Yes, definitely. So I think there's different approaches to this. So I think first understanding what racism as a system looks like within white supremacy, because racism is built off the back of white supremacy, of ensuring that Black people, understand white supremacy, and then understand capitalism. So the fact that capitalism is built on capital and people selling their labor or trading their labor for capital, and then understanding what does a lack of generational wealth do to that. So people tend to say a lot of Black Lives Matter activists or Pan-African activists are asking for reparations. Why? Because generational wealth is very rare within the Black community because of the way structural inequalities exist and the way that they affect generation upon generation of people. So I guess the best way of tackling is understanding the systems we're trying to fight, and then look at the organizations doing work around it. So for the curriculum, we have organizations like the Black Curriculum. You have people working like the Runnymede Trust, Race on the Agenda, who are working to lobby government on key policy issues. They did a European funded piece of research around the Grenfell Tower tragedy in terms of who was affected, where are they affected from, What are the key solutions that they as people were asking for as well? So really seeking out the key experts in those areas and seeing how we can support them.
Okay. And we're talking about the call for sort of statues, decolonizing the national curriculum, and also holding corporates to account. I remember when you interviewed on the BBC, they were asking about whether Twitter just confirmed that it will ban sort of hate speech from their platform. Which I guess is a step towards that in the right direction, holding big corporates into account.
Yes, I think yes, definitely. So racism exists on multiple layers. You go from the microaggressions of what people say to you in the street to how corporates are working and shaping how society reacts to racism or to inequalities through hiring practices, and organizations like Twitter choosing to change their programming language to remove racially charged terms like master slave within their coding or within the way that they code algorithms is really key, I think, because Twitter is a global platform that millions of people all over the world use. Controlling hate speech is something that many people have been asking corporates to change, to address, particularly on social media platforms. And I think that's a long way to go, but I think all of us as individuals can take a part to play by challenging those people online as well. Because we've seen how long it takes for inflammatory messages to be deleted, and depending on who's sent the message, how it's responded to as well.
I guess people engines like Twitter have been ramping up against hate speech, and banning people use hate speech or any kind of racial terms, or even there was a case like a few days ago of a famous singer using anti-Semite sort of language, which of course had to be banned. And as you say, this is definitely a step in the right direction. Also, Ethel, when it comes to BLM, Black Lives Matter, as I was trying to read more and more and researching, I saw there was some sort of there also was some criticism towards the movement. For example, one of them was Black Lives Matter is racializing society, also because of because of the slogan Black Lives Matter. What do you think of that? What's your sort of take on this kind of the criticism towards Black Lives Matter?
I think I find it very interesting when people come to criticize Black Lives Matter. They place so much power in the hands of the movement to say we're racializing society when society has already been racialized, and that's the work of Black Lives Matter to try and dismantle that. If we look at why is it that we associate violence or aggression with Black people in society, or the brown people in society, or the darker people in society, that's already racialization. When we look at the way people are spoken about, or the way representation in the media looks, it's usually Black people who aren't there, or Black people are there for entertainment purposes or as sports people. But that racialism has already existed and is part of the racist structure that we're working to dismantle.
It's all part of this kind of systemic racism that you were talking about before.
Yes, exactly. So it's not Black Lives Matter working to racialize society. We're working to dismantle the racialization that's been adopted as part of society.
Of course. And, when it comes to, Black Lives Matter, so, there's people saying, Black Lives Matter, in a way, racialize society, because by creating two types of groups, you got Black people and white people. So I guess, what we're trying to say is that, no, this is not the truth. What we're trying to do, we're trying to, create, I guess, make society as a whole, like a unite society. That's kind of the main message, I would say.
Yes.
Of course. And of course, when it comes to, you said Black Lives Matter was founded back in 2013, if I'm not wrong. I know, as you said, it's grown from, like a single hashtag, Black Lives Matter, to become probably the largest civil rights movement of this century. I read that on the 6th of June, probably they had the biggest number of people marching in the street. I think it was all around America, in 550 cities in America. I think they were counting almost like 500,000 all in one day. And then I was also reading that since it all happened, we have seen between 15 million and 26 million of people marching down the street for for the cause of Black Lives Matter. Which I guess leads me to the next question. When it comes to civil rights and also our movement is the Roosevelt movement. We are all in favor of the benchmark of all our activities is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which dates as far back as 1948, Eleanor Roosevelt. When it comes to civil rights, a name springs to mind, which is MLK, Martin Luther King. How do you think the message has changed from, Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" to Black Lives Matter? Over, I would say 40, 50 years have gone by. How the message has changed from, from what Martin Luther King used to advocate and Black Lives Matter?
Cool. So I think it's over 50 years since Martin Luther King did his speech of "I Have a Dream." The difference from then to now is we're tired and we're still asking for the same things. We're still being expected to do the peaceful marches. We're still being expected to write the long petitions. We're still expected to lobby Parliament in the same ways that they don't respond. We're still being asked to do all the things that Martin Luther King said, like, this is the way to reconciliation, and yet he was still shot by the same people who tell him to be peaceful. So I think the message remains the same, but the urgency remains, because how much longer must we wait? I think now you see more people are less, like the petitions aren't working, and we can see that. And there's only so long you can keep asking people to do the same thing to achieve change when we don't see the same level of change happening. Yeah.
Okay.
The frustration is definitely very real.
The frustration is operational.
The anger continues to build layer upon layer, because what are we supposed to do? Wait for more people to die? Are we supposed to only be out there when people are dying? I think the message remains the same, but I think the methods are definitely changing.
I guess if Martin Luther King had was still here, we would have a way much different world than the one we live in.
Well, that's what people say, but I think we've had many versions of Martin Luther King since, or different forms. John Smith, who recently passed away, was also a civil rights movement who walked along Selma and did many of the same things alongside him, but he was still living in the same world. I think the nature of structural inequality or white supremacy just changes the way in which it adapts for us to fight the system. So the system remains the same, just the ways in which we experience it as a form of oppression change.
How can we change the system? Of course, by making our voice heard, walking out, marching the street. But I know it's a very, broad question. How can we, how can we, each one of us, can actually help change the system?
Sure, I think it starts with us. So learning what is anti-racism, like how do we engage with anti-racism thought, but also activism and taking responsibility for that. What is racist? Because racism and us all living within racist societies means we internalize it. So colorism, for example, and me seeing myself, me being a darker woman, I might sometimes go, oh, I'm not as beautiful as that person, but that's internalized because that's the standard, or I'm projecting my standard of beauty, or society's projected their standard of beauty onto me most of my life. So I now start seeing myself as less beautiful or less than. But it's about understanding, how does racism impact us as individuals? And then how can we work to dismantle those same beliefs that we hold? And when we are experiencing, witnessing, or partaking in microaggressions, how do you stop that process? Or how do you engage in being a better ally to people fighting for civil rights, to Black people, but also to Black women, to Black LGBTQ society, to the Black disabled community? How can we be better allies wherever we are? How do we create space for these conversations to still happen? Now that the protests aren't as visible, now that the protests aren't as organized on the streets, how do we hold organizations we work with to account? How do we start asking them about what is your commitment to racial equality? Because a lot of organizations committed to, we're here to support Black Lives Matter, we're committed to racial equality, but a few weeks on, a couple of months on now, what are they doing? A lot of organizations seem to have forgotten their commitment and were jumping onto the bandwagon to retain their social standing as organizations that are responsible and care about the communities. But it's about saying, each of us, continue writing those emails, continue turning up to meetings, have those meetings where you can, and challenge the people in power.
Or even I can make videos.
Yes, true. Having conversations, I think, is a really key part of moving forward, but also finding practical ways of engaging with supporting the movement. So there's the movement and there's the organization, right? I think it's also important to differentiate that. A lot of people have raised their discontent or whatever it is for the Black Lives Matter, the organization, but the movement still very much exists. And there's campaigns like Black Pound Day, where you can focus on Black Pound days to buy from Black-owned businesses, to support them in their mission, because it's all about building Black capital, right? Once the Black community have more capital, the more lobbying power that we have to leverage governments and to leverage corporations to work in our favor, because money talks. So I encourage people to look out for the Black Pound Day or Black Pound Day. It's a movement and an organization working to support Black-owned businesses and to redistribute capital across society.
Happy to to show something on the screen if you'd like to, if you'd like me to.
Yeah, please do.
What's the name again?
Black Pound Day.
Black Pound Day. Yeah.
The next one is on the 1st of August, I believe, this Saturday.
27th of yeah.
So that was the first one, and there's a whole calendar of events, of dates coming up now.
I think it's important that our viewers have all the.
Maybe we can add the links into the end, into the.
Oh, the 1st of. Sorry, this is very old technology, new technology to me. There you go. Black Pound Day. Share. I guess this is one of the sort of websites that people can have a look at. Can you all see it? I'm expecting like a wave of yeses.
Yes.
Oh, good. This is just one of the as you can see, they were talking about all the different sectors: travel, grocery, food and restaurant, education, gifts,
exactly,
for people to see.
And the Instagram profile is a great way of finding out the latest updates and days when new things are coming up.
Of course. Ethel, which that leads me to my next question. Will Black Lives Matter? Black Lives Matter. Will it succeed to shake up the world, to not just to stir up interest and also to move in the right direction, but would it actually, in the long term, change the world and probably tear down the old, kind of old world?
Big questions, Emmanuel. Big questions.
What's the hope? What's the intention? What's the hope?
Sure. So I think the key drivers behind Black Lives Matter are making people realize the way Black experiences are in society, because I think so many people imagine, no, we're now an equal society, everything is okay, we have human rights, government cares about human rights, everyone is living fair and fine. But actually, by raising awareness for our experiences, it's about saying, this is not just a Black fight. Black people can't achieve civil rights or can't achieve equality to be realized alone. The same way feminism relied on, we depend on men to also work with us, to support us, to talk about what is happening, what does sexism look like in the workplace, who is involved, and the perpetrators are not usually the people shouting out about what is going wrong, but we need the allies to come alongside us and create that societal pressure for change to really happen, from government, from corporations, but also from all of us as individuals to make those changes. So I guess the main call is, will you join us in our stand? Are you standing with us? And if you're saying you are standing with us, what is it that you're doing? How are you standing with us? Are you working on yourself through anti-racism, teaching yourself what anti-racism looks like, to be a better ally, to be a stronger ally? Are you having conversations behind closed doors with your family? What are you doing to hold organizations to account? Because the movement is as much personal as it is international and global and corporate, but each of us need to be doing something.
The very definition of Black Lives Matter is a decentralized, sort of civil rights movement, right. Which advocates for non-violent civil sort of disobedience, to aim at all the things that that we've been talked about sort of today.
It's not all civil disobedience.
Sorry?
It's not all civil disobedience.
No, sorry, non-violent
civil
disobedience. Sorry, non-violent civil disobedience.
Cool.
If we've got sort of to the last sort of, I guess, 5 minutes of our interview, and thank you, Edel, thank you so much for being with us today. How would you say, if you got the next sort of 3 or 4 minutes for yourself, what's the message that you want to send to all our viewers today, to our listeners? How would they would like to remember you by?
Okay, sure. So there's 3 questions there. I think the first one for all the viewers out there is, firstly, just because the protests have stopped doesn't mean the movement doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
It's unsustainable for all of us to be protesting every single day for however many months it's going to take for any real change to happen. But actually, if we all concentrate our efforts on holding our members of parliament or writing to your local MPs about issues that you're seeing and experiencing, it's all about all of us taking action in whatever way you can. If that is donating to Black organizations, if that is supporting Black charities or businesses that are working to dismantle the system through education, through healthcare, if they're creating resources, we need your support, really. And I think the movement continues. Activism is not just about being on the street. It's about the way of life in which you choose to continually live for a cause. And that's what I'd ask all the viewers watching today. And from now on, ask yourself, what are you doing? And if you don't know what to do, there's lots of information online about being good allies, good allyship, how you create space for minority voices as well where you are. I think the second thing is for people going forward and wondering, okay, so how else can I make a difference? What else can I be doing? I think there's many petitions going on, and make sure that they're ones directly linking to government or linking to organizations that can lobby for change. So I think change.org is a great website, but actually signing petitions that are on ukparliament.gov or your regional and local parliaments is the most effective way of showing support to different campaigns. And also finding people and asking them, what can you do to help? It's not always the same. Sometimes it's volunteering with our organizations as well. And finally, I'd say ways to remember me or to find out about the work that I'm doing. You can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Ethel Tambudzai, as spelled in my headline. Follow Sonaaar and the work that we're doing to bring, amplify the voice of Black communities around the world. And make sure to subscribe to our newsletter. It's our main way of communicating at the moment. Lots of exciting updates to come soon.
Amazing, Edel. Thank you so much. And I guess as Roots of Movement, because we base ourselves on such an important, such a paramount document, which is the Declaration of Human Rights. We strive in our own with our own means and with our own intellect and voice and actions to create a society which is fair for all, where everyone has equal rights, as the document states. And of course, as you said, we need the help of the whole society to come together as one, and help fight this this common cause.
Yeah, I agree. And I think great work that you're doing at the Russo movement. I think providing space and a platform for marginalized voices is a great step forward to strong allyship.
Absolutely. Edel, I think we've reached the end of our interview. Again, Thank you so very much for being with us today. Edward Tambudzai, co-founder of Sonaaar, everyone. And to all our viewers, thank you so much for following us, for viewing us in such a huge number. And as I said to you, we'll be on a break for the next few weeks. It's summer after all. It doesn't look like, but it is still summer. Yeah. Today in London is a very sunny and hot day. I think they say we will reach about 33, 34 degrees.
Yes.
Which I'm really not looking forward to. Anyway. But so again, thank you so much for thanks very much for your support. Thank you so much for watching us. And again, I'll see you in September. I'll see you in the next few. I'll see you in September with the next few weeks. And until then, bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Edel.